Steelers fans, stop everything you're doing right now because what I'm about to tell you could literally reshape the entire future of this franchise. This is not a drill. This is not clickbait. This is real breaking news that every single person in Steelers Nation needs to hear immediately. We're talking about a potential wide receiver addition that flew completely under the radar and an even bigger quarterback situation developing behind the scenes that could change absolutely everything we thought we knew about this team's direction. If you're not subscribed to this channel yet, now is the time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications because the moves happening right now in Pittsburgh are going to define this franchise for years to come. Trust me, you do not want to miss a single update. All right, let's dive straight into this because there is so much to unpack here. We all know that this offseason has felt different. There's an energy in the air. Every single headline seems to carry more weight than usual. Every rumor feels like it could be the domino that sets everything else in motion. And right now, Pittsburgh finds itself at the center of two major storylines that are developing simultaneously. On one hand, we've got a new wide receiver target emerging from the most unexpected place. On the other hand, there's a quarterback situation brewing that could completely alter the trajectory of this entire organization. This is the kind of offseason that separates good teams from great teams. This is where championships are built or where seasons fall apart before they even begin. Let's start with the receiver situation because this one caught a lot of people off guard. The Miami Dolphins just went through a massive roster overhaul. They made significant cap cuts, releasing several veteran players as part of what appears to be a complete organizational reset. Now, when that news broke, everyone immediately zeroed in on the biggest name, Tyreek Hill. The headlines exploded, social media went absolutely crazy, fans everywhere started speculating about whether their team could land the superstar receiver, and yeah, that would be incredible. That would be a franchise-altering move. But here's the thing that most people completely missed in all that chaos. There was another receiver released in those cuts. Someone who doesn't generate the same headlines, someone who won't trend on Twitter for days, but someone who might actually make more sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers than anyone wants to admit. I'm talking about Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Now, I can already hear some of you through the screen. I can feel the disappointment. That's not the splash move we were hoping for. That's not the kind of signing that gets fans jumping out of their seats. And you know what? You're absolutely right. This isn't a blockbuster edition. This isn't the kind of move that dominates SportsCenter for a week. But here's what I need you to understand, and this is crucial. Building a championship roster is not always about the flashiest names. It's about structure. It's about depth. It's about having reliable pieces in every single spot on the roster. And sometimes the smartest moves are the ones that don't make headlines. Let me give you some context on Westbrook-Ikhine because his story is actually pretty remarkable. This is a guy who went undrafted. Nobody believed in him enough to spend a pick. He had to fight and claw his way onto an NFL roster just to get a chance. And what did he do with that chance? He absolutely made the most of it. Over 5 seasons with the Tennessee Titans, he accumulated 19 touchdowns as primarily a depth receiver. Let that sink in for a moment. 19 touchdowns from a guy who was never supposed to be there in the first place. That's not luck. That's production. That's a player who knows how to find the end zone when it matters most. But here's where it gets even more impressive. In 2024, Westbrook-Ikhine had 9 touchdowns in just 9 starts, 9 touchdowns in 9 games. Do the math on that. That's an elite level of efficiency. That's red zone dominance. That's a player who understands his role and executes it at a high level. He's not out there trying to be something he's not. He's not demanding targets or complaining about his usage. He's going out there running his routes, finding soft spots in the defense, and coming down with touchdowns when his team needs them most. And that kind of mentality, that kind of production is exactly what this Pittsburgh offense has been missing. Now, I know what happened last season in Miami. His numbers dipped, his role was reduced, he became more of a rotational piece in that offense. But let's be honest about what was happening down there. The Dolphins were dealing with their own issues. The offensive system was changing. Playing time became inconsistent. And when you're a depth receiver fighting for snaps in a crowded room, your stats are going to reflect that reality. It doesn't erase what he showed before. It doesn't change the fact that when given opportunity, this guy produces. And in Pittsburgh, with a clear need for depth behind DK Metcalf, there would be plenty of opportunity. Speaking of DK Metcalf, let's talk about the current state of this receiver room because this is where the conversation gets really important. Everyone knows Metcalf is a legitimate #1 receiver. The guy is an absolute freak of nature. His combination of size, speed, and physicality is nearly impossible to defend when he's on his game. But here's the problem that kept showing up last season over and over again. Behind Metcalf, the depth just wasn't there. Defenses started keying in. They knew they could bracket the star and take their chances against everyone else. The red zone became a struggle. Contested catch situations became coin flips instead of guaranteed conversions. And when you're trying to compete in a brutal AFC North, you simply cannot afford those kinds of weaknesses. That's why a player like Westbrook-Ikhine makes so much sense when you really think about it. He's tall, he's physical, he can line up in multiple spots across the formation. He does all the little things that coaches love, but fans rarely notice. Blocking on the perimeter, making contested catches in traffic, understanding situational football, and being in the right place at the right time. These aren't sexy skills. They don't show up on highlight reels, but they absolutely show up in winning football games. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. But let's be realistic about the landscape here, because the receiver market is complicated this offseason. George Pickens is out there, but there's no guarantee he even hits the open market. Teams could lock him up before free agency even begins. Alec Pierce is another name floating around, but same situation applies. And yeah, Tyreek Hill is available, but think about what that would actually require. He's coming off a significant injury, he's getting older, and he would demand a massive financial commitment that would reshape the entire salary cap situation. Is that really the smart play? Is that really the best use of resources? Here's what I think the smarter approach looks like, and stay with me on this because I think this is exactly what the front office is thinking. You go into the draft with receiver as a priority, you add young talent with upside, you bring in a guy who can grow with this team and develop into something special. Then, on top of that, you add a proven veteran like Westbrook-Ikhine to stabilize the depth chart immediately. That's how you build layers. That's how you create competition in the receiver room. That's how you make sure that if someone goes down with an injury or struggles with consistency, you're not suddenly scrambling to find answers mid-season. That's championship-level roster construction. And honestly, as a fan, I love this mindset. It shows intentionality. It shows that the front office understands you can't just rely on DK Metcalf and hope everything works out. You need bodies, you need red zone presence, you need versatility across the entire receiver corps. The days of having one star and a bunch of question marks are over. If you want to compete with the best teams in this conference, you need depth at every position, especially wide receiver. Now, will adding Westbrook-Ikhine alone transform this offense into a juggernaut? Let's be honest with each other here. No, he's not a franchise-altering player. He's not going to single-handedly take this team to the Super Bowl, but could he be an important piece of a larger puzzle? Could he be part of a comprehensive plan that finally gives this offense the depth and balance it's been desperately lacking? Absolutely, without question, and sometimes those are the moves that matter most. But here's where this whole conversation takes a massive turn, because everything we just talked about, all the receiver depth discussion, all the draft strategy, all the free agency planning, it all hinges on one absolutely critical question. Who is going to be throwing the football? And that brings us to part 2 of this story, and trust me, this is where things get really interesting. Because while everyone has been focused on the receiver market, there's been a much bigger storyline developing in the background, a storyline that could completely reshape everything we think we know about this team's future. And it all centers around one name that Pittsburgh fans need to start paying very close attention to, Tua Tagovailoa. Let me set the scene here because the context is crucial. The Miami Dolphins just underwent a complete organizational reset. They fired head coach Mike McDaniel. They brought in Jeff Hafley, a defensive-minded coach who represents a totally different philosophical approach. They released Tyreek Hill. They moved on from Bradley Chubb. They cut several veteran players. This is a team that is clearly hitting the reset button and preparing for a new era. But here's the fascinating part. Through all of those moves, through all of those cuts, one player has remained on the roster, Tua Tagovailoa. Now, that's interesting for a lot of reasons. There's been speculation for weeks, maybe even months at this point, that Miami could move on from Tua. A new coaching staff usually means a new direction, a new vision. Sometimes that means starting fresh at the most important position on the field. But according to multiple reports coming out right now, the Dolphins aren't looking to simply cut Tua. They're exploring trade options. They want to see what kind of return they can get for their quarterback, and that changes everything for teams around the league, including Pittsburgh. But here's where the situation gets incredibly complicated, and you need to understand the financial implications here. Tua signed a massive contract extension in 2024. We're talking about a 4-year deal worth over $212 million. Just for 2026 alone, he's scheduled to make $39 million in base salary. Plus, there's a $15 million option bonus that needs to be picked up in March. When you factor in workout bonuses and roster bonuses, you're looking at roughly $55 million total due this year, with $39 million of that fully guaranteed. These are not small numbers. This is franchise-defining money. And here's what makes the trade situation so complex. If Miami releases Tua before the new league year begins, they're still on the hook for that guaranteed money. They'd be paying a quarterback who isn't even on their roster anymore. But if they trade him, the acquiring team takes on the 2026 salary and bonus, while Miami absorbs a massive dead cap hit. We're talking about $45 million in dead cap if he's traded, nearly $100 million if he's released before March. That's not just math. That's organizational strategy that affects every other move a team can make for years. So what does all of this mean for Pittsburgh? Well, let's look at the current quarterback situation. Aaron Rodgers is a free agent again. He's going to be 43 years old next season. Now, Rodgers could absolutely come back. He could decide he wants to run it back one more time. He could sign an extension and commit to Pittsburgh for the next couple of years, but he could also walk. He could decide he wants to try something different. He could look at the roster and decide this isn't the right situation for him anymore. Or, and this is the scenario nobody wants to talk about, he could retire, just walk away from football entirely. Until that situation is completely resolved, every single quarterback movement around the league matters to Pittsburgh. Every trade rumor, every free agency whisper, every contract negotiation, all of it directly impacts what the Steelers might need to do. And that's why the Tua situation is so significant, because if Rodgers doesn't return, Pittsburgh cannot afford to be caught without a plan. So let me ask the honest question that we all need to consider. If Aaron Rodgers walks away, are the Steelers prepared to pivot quickly? Tua Tagovailoa is younger. He's proven he can run an efficient, high-level offense when he's healthy. He's had stretches where he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in football. The numbers don't lie. When everything is clicking, Tua can absolutely ball out. But that contract, man, that contract is a serious commitment. You're not just acquiring a player, you're tying your financial future to one guy for the foreseeable future. And if you're wrong about that decision, it sets the franchise back years. I'll be honest with you all, I'm genuinely torn on this one. On one hand, you absolutely cannot afford to be stuck in quarterback limbo. We've seen what that does to franchises, years of mediocrity, spinning your wheels, watching your window close while you're still searching for answers at the most important position. That's a nightmare scenario that every fan base dreads. On the other hand, absorbing a contract of that magnitude only makes sense if you truly, genuinely believe that Tua is the long-term answer. If you have any doubts, any hesitation, that's a lot of money to commit to uncertainty. And this is exactly where both storylines connect. You can spend all offseason adding depth receivers, you can draft well, you can build around DK Metcalf and create a legitimate supporting cast, but none of it matters, absolutely none of it, if the quarterback situation isn't stable. You could have the best receiver room in football, and it wouldn't mean anything without someone capable of delivering the football consistently. The quarterback position is the foundation. Everything else is built on top of it. If the Steelers are quietly monitoring Tua's situation, and I believe they absolutely are, that tells me something important. It tells me this front office is preparing for every possible scenario. They're not just hoping Rodgers comes back and everything works out perfectly. They're doing the work, they're making contingency plans, they're watching the market and staying ready to move if the situation demands it. That's smart, that's professional, that's exactly what a well-run organization should be doing. When you connect both storylines together, the receiver depth strategy and the quarterback market monitoring, it paints a very clear picture of what's happening in Pittsburgh right now. This is a team that understands it cannot afford to stand still. They're looking at improving the weapons, yes, but they're also keeping a close eye on the most important position in all of sports. They're not being passive. They're not waiting for things to just happen. They're being proactive. They're being strategic. They're being smart. To me, this entire offseason approach feels decisive without being reckless. It feels intentional without being desperate. It feels like a franchise that genuinely understands that the window is fragile, that you can't take anything for granted, that the AFC is absolutely loaded with talent and you need to maximize every opportunity you get. If Rodgers comes back, you build smart depth around him and make a real push. If he doesn't, you better have a real plan, not just hope and prayers. So where does all of this leave us as fans? I'd say hopeful, but cautiously so. There's genuine opportunity here, there's flexibility in the cap, there's talent available in the market, but there are also massive financial decisions on the horizon, long-term consequences that will reverberate through this organization for years. It's exciting and terrifying at the same time. The moves that get made in the next few weeks won't just affect the 2026 season. They'll define the next chapter of Steelers football. As a fan, I want aggression. I want to see this team make moves, but I want smart aggression. I want calculated risks with real upside. I want a clear direction, a coherent vision that everyone can believe in. And right now it feels like the Steelers are standing at a crossroads. The path they choose will determine everything. This offseason isn't about one flashy move that dominates headlines for a week and then fades away. It's about direction. It's about building something sustainable. On one side, you're exploring smart depth additions at wide receiver, guys who can strengthen the roster without destroying the salary cap. On the other side, you're watching the quarterback market carefully, knowing that everything could shift at any moment. That combination of patience and preparedness is exactly what championship organizations do. And here's the emotional truth that I think every single person in Steelers Nation can relate to. We're tired of hovering. We're tired of being competitive enough to make some noise, but never dangerous enough to truly contend. We want to feel like this team has a real plan, not just for next season, but for the next 5 years. We want to believe that there's a vision, a strategy, a commitment to excellence that goes beyond just trying to survive another year, whether it's adding reliable receivers, drafting impact players, bringing Rodgers back, or pivoting to a new quarterback entirely. The decisions coming up will define this era of Steelers football. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that they get this right, hopeful that they balance aggression with intelligence, hopeful that the next move isn't just safe, but truly strategic. Now, I want to hear from you, Steelers Nation. Would you take the calculated depth approach at receiver? Would you seriously consider making a move for Tua if Rodgers doesn't return? Or do you think Pittsburgh should go all in on the draft and build entirely through young talent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a real conversation about this. No hot takes, no overreactions, just honest discussion between fans who care about this team. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, if you appreciate honest, direct Steelers analysis without the unnecessary drama, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're pushing to hit our subscriber goal, and we're getting closer every single day. If you've been watching without subscribing, now is the perfect time to join the family. Let's build this Steelers Nation community together. Big decisions are coming, major moves are on the horizon, and you're going to want to be here for every single update. I'll see you in the next one.